How do you break into an industry you're not currently a part of? Clubhouse. Let me show you how, coming up. Hey, I'm Sam with Systems of Impact, your place for growth-minded millennials looking to find their six-figure careers. So before we find out how you can start leveraging Clubhouse to break into any industry, let's better understand what Clubhouse actually is. So let's just do a quick high-level overview. So the first thing you need to understand about Clubhouse is that it is an audio-only format. You're not going to see video on there. It doesn't have recordings. It's no text. It's all audio. The only thing that you see in text is just what the room or the club or things of that nature actually are. When you get into the particular rooms, it's all audio. So that is something that you need to keep in mind with this particular format. The next biggest piece is that the platform is currently in beta, and so it's only available on iOS and iPad. And the iPad app, it's kind of wonky, so just keep that in mind, but it's only on the iPhone platform. The other thing to keep in mind is that it is not on Android. So again, it's in testing and it's only on the iOS platform. The last thing to keep in mind when it comes to Clubhouse is that it is by invite only. So if you currently don't have access to it, that potentially could come down the road. They're again only in testing, but as things start to open up, more invites are becoming available. So it potentially could get easier to get onto the platform over time. But again, just things to keep in mind. Now, the other thing to keep in mind before we dive into the Clubhouse aspect is it's very important that you understand what you're trying to do. And this will go back to, I want to teach you how to fish. I want you to understand how I think, so that way you can apply it in your own situation rather than having to have everything be contextualized just for you. You can take how I think, apply it to what you're doing, and then run with it. So in this particular case, this won't work for every profession. I want to make that abundantly clear. But the principles are the same. You can go through and apply it to any particular industry, and depending on what that industry is, will define what varying levels of success you will have. The other thing to keep in mind is use your curiosity to your benefit. If you haven't watched my video on the Spazzrall method, I'll go ahead and link it up in the cards and I'll put it in the description below. But one of the key points in there is that curiosity is going to be king in this arena. And if you already know exactly what you want to do, awesome. You can just go ahead and dive right into the Clubhouse piece of it, and I'll get to that here in a moment. But for anybody that is more on the fence of what they want to do, then go into the areas that you're curious about and then follow that curiosity, and then we'll see where things land. And that brings me to how can you actually leverage Clubhouse? Now, as you're trying to break into an industry, some of the key things that has always been more of a challenge has been, it's easy to find what professions are in that particular industry or in that particular career path. What has been more challenging over the last few years is not the skill set, but what are people actually looking for when they're looking for someone to hire for that particular position, as an example. Or what are some of the soft skills that they're asking for that isn't on the requirement sheet? A lot of these different things are really intangibles, is the word I'm looking for. And because they're more intangible, you're not going to see them just readily apparent right up front. So based upon what you're trying to look for clubs and rooms that are for that particular area. And if you're just getting curious, Clubhouse ends up giving you a whole range of areas with sub areas that you can dive into. So start searching through all those. There's thousands of clubs in there. So you can actually get lost in just the clubs alone. But just dive in there and see what sparks that curiosity. And if you already know exactly where you want to go, dive headlong in that particular area and start looking at the clubs in that area. The next piece, once you've started to dive into those different arenas and the different clubs, start looking at the people in those areas and start to follow them, and the people that, again, look interesting or curious about, or potentially you can help, or they can help you. See all those different people, because as you start to follow more people, that will give you more access to more clubs and more rooms. And then it's like a spider web effect. You'll start to see more areas open up to you the more you start to engage in the platform. I want to give you a little bit of a secret here. And this may actually come as a little bit of a surprise, and that is a good thing, because the key to this whole process, and I'm using this different camera for this specific reason, is talk and engage. That's the secret. Talking and engaging. If you passively listen to the content, you can potentially get a lot of valuable information, and that is great. That's going to help you a ton. But where the real key to success comes in is when you start to raise your hand, you get brought up on stage, and you start to talk, and you start to engage, and you start to have a conversation. Because that is where the magic happens. Talking and engaging is crucial to this whole process, because if you don't talk and engage with the rooms that you dive into, then essentially you're going to be passively listening. So like I mentioned, there is a level of success that you can have just by that process. Just by the process of osmosis, you will garner some kind of learnings from it. However, when you start to talk and you start to engage and you start to have a conversation, that is when you start to see things really open up, and you start to build out that network. You start to build relationships. You start to build friendships. You start to see where the magic really happens. And LinkedIn was one of the key pieces for this. Prior to this, you would, and it still is a great place. Don't get me wrong. But this gives you a level of access that LinkedIn potentially didn't give you. And that is where if you engage somebody on LinkedIn, for example, you go ahead and you send them an email, for example, you want to connect, you want to, engage their expertise on something, you want to understand a particular company. You go ahead and you have that coffee meeting with them and you engage in that way. It was more elongated. It took more time. It took more effort. But Clubhouse reduces a lot of that. So from Clubhouse perspective, when you start to engage and you start to communicate and you start to build these relationships, you can then start to, right within there, start to have rooms with those people and chat with them. You can start to take that into the real world and start to engage them in there and start to deepen these relationships. This is where it gets crucial, because if you want to be interesting, you have to be interested. You have to be vested in other people's success, and you have to empathize with what they're going through. For me personally, this was a huge struggle for me. As you can potentially tell, I'm more analytical by nature, and empathy didn't come naturally to me. And I remember years ago, one of my mentors, Ramit Sethi, he was talking about just various things, and I ended up going out and having a day trip with him out in San Francisco, and this was, like 8 years ago now. Going out there, we're on a photo shoot, we're doing some discussions, and I asked him a question of, how do you be more empathetic? Because at that point in time, I wasn't going through the greatest periods of time. It was still kind of a struggle. I was still, potentially successful by all measures of a success at the time, but empathy was something that was eluding me and it was holding me back. And so I asked him, and his answer still surprises me to this day. He said, Sam, it's a skill. Like anything else, it can be learned. And to learn that particular skill, you have to start understanding where people are coming from. And that blew my mind. And because if you're trying to understand where somebody is coming from and why they are the way they are, and is actually why I ended up getting into product management of all things. But once you start to understand where people are coming from and that everybody is going through their own struggle, and when you understand that, it gives you a sense of, oh, okay, I know, even though I don't firsthand potentially understand what that person is feeling, I can understand why they're feeling it. And this is key when it comes to networking and talking with people in Clubhouse and talking with people in general, actually. It was something that took me a long time to learn. But if you want to be interesting, be interested. Ask a lot of questions. Be curious. Dive into other people's world. And this tip alone is going to, if you take it to heart, is going to open up your world more than you probably ever thought it ever could have been. But from a Clubhouse perspective, that is going to be key because it's going to help you build out that network. It's going to help you find that curiosity, and it's going to help you get pointed in the right direction to really break into that industry. Now, as a little added bonus, as you're trying to break into these industries, you're talking to people, you're engaging them, you're building out those relationships, you're building empathy, you'll also inherently start to get a better understanding of that industry, but also other industries. So it's kind of like a tertiary piece of knowledge that you're getting. And because you're starting to plug yourself into that ecosystem, you're going to gain that inherent knowledge. Now, because of that, you're going to start to gain access to a shadow network. And what this is a lot of high-level opportunities are never posted publicly. They're always done in a shadow realm, so to speak. The key here is that it's going to open up a different kind of world for you. And people need to know how awesome you are, or that you even exist, to then be able to say, hey, Sam, I saw that this awesome position opened up. I think you'd be a great fit for it. Is this something you'd be interested in? This is a massive bonus, and is actually how I've gotten a majority of my positions over the last few years. I rarely submit a resume through the front door. It's usually through some kind of relationship I built. And it's one of those where, hey, this isn't technically up, but I think you'd be a great fit for it. Going through this particular process is going to open up that shadow realm for you, and it's going to help you break into an industry even faster than you thought possible the first time. Now, if you're finding value in today's video, make sure to hit that like button. And now I want to hear from you. How can you use Clubhouse to jump into a potential industry that you've been thinking about? And how can you start leveraging that platform? Go ahead and leave that in the comments below. I appreciate you taking some time to better understand what Clubhouse is, how you can leverage it to gain access to different industries and potentially break into any industry. If you do have any questions, make sure to put those in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.